The following podcast is created and sponsored by High Beam Ministry.
Who's there?
Special delivery.
Throughout the world, past and present, there are two major forms of philosophy, Western and Eastern. And these two forms of philosophy are very different from each other. The Bible was written by Hebrews in a culture that was predominantly Eastern in its philosophy, while we, the readers of the Bible, live in a culture that is predominantly Western in its philosophy. Eastern philosophy is the form of philosophy of all ancient cultures, as well as all primitive cultures that still exist today. Western philosophy was developed in the Greek culture by its ancient philosophers about 3,000 years ago. When we read the Bible, which was written from an ancient Eastern Hebrew perspective, we will frequently misinterpret the text because we are reading it from a Western Greek perspective. When it comes to reading the Bible in its proper perspective, the four major differences between Hebrew and Greek thought must be kept in mind: concrete versus abstract thinking, passive versus active descriptions, impersonal versus personal relationships, and linear versus block logic.
Welcome to the Erzatz Coffee Shop. This is Jay, your Truth Barista, and I'm serving up a steamy cup of God's truth for the average Joe. You can catch me and this podcast on my websites, truthbarista.com, all one word, truthbarista.com, and highbeamministry.com. That's HIGHBEAM ministry.com, as in car high beam. We're shining the light of God's truth on the road ahead.
Truth Barista, I am so excited about getting together with you today and having our conversation. You know why?
And why would that be?
Well, because there's so much that I've been hearing from people in my local church or in the coffee house here from different people that come in, and I'm telling you that the Jews get no credit whatsoever for the Bible. It's like when you see at the end of a movie and you see all the credits rolling, there's nothing there about Jewish people. And I'm going, why is that a problem?
Okay, what do you mean, like in a Bible study, or you're talking
everywhere.
Bible presentations or anything?
Well, you look at, for example, statements of faith, for example, of most evangelical churches. Nothing is ever said about the Jewish people. The fact that we inherited all of their stuff, they wrote the scriptures and all of that. Jesus was a Jew. None of that is mentioned. It's almost like they Gentilized everything. Jesus was born in Brooklyn, New York, and he spoke as his native tongue English or Brooklynese. I mean, it's just absolutely insane why the Jews aren't given credit for what Christianity has inherited.
Well, you're right in my wheelhouse right now. And in the circles that I travel, what's encouraging is a lot more evangelicals are starting to look at our Jewish roots, our Hebraic heritage, as we call it, which is a good thing. I don't think enough is being done. And you're right. I mean, look at the greatest story ever told with Peter O'Toole as Jesus, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus from the Middle East, right? That is such a classic case of the Gentilization of Jesus. And it does kind of come back from, a part of it is the replacement theology thing, the rejection of Judaism that was picked up as the church became more Gentilized in the 2nd century. So we definitely have that at play. Another one is just ethnocentrism. Every culture seems to envision Jesus in the way they understand and can relate to. Mm-hmm. In some cultures, Jesus is much more dark-skinned than what we would consider in many Western churches, European, United States churches. You see the picture of Jesus on the wall. He may have mildly brown hair, but he's still white-skinned and sometimes has blue or green eyes on there.
Yeah, and what's interesting in some of those movies, they all have British accents, which I don't understand. As if a British accent actually is Middle Eastern. I don't get it.
That drives me nuts when I'm watching shows. What, you couldn't find any Middle Eastern actors that actually had, Middle Eastern accent. And there are a variety of accents depending on where you go, just like there are in the United States. I'll tell you, one of the best shows that I have seen lately, and I would encourage you and the people in the booth listening next to us here, The Chosen. That whole series is fantastic because they've done a great job trying to really trying to capture that first century feel, from the clothing to the talking. You don't get a lot of that British accent that pulls you out of the situation. By being genuine with accents, clothing, looks, scenarios, whatever. It pulls you into the action. And that's really one of my, as I said, it's in my wheelhouse, because when I read the scriptures, I read it from a different mindset than I grew up with. And that goes right into what you talked about. A lot of people were raised in a particular mindset, a way of looking at things and thinking of things that really mask or warp the original. So it's kind of like, put it this way, when I was growing up about third grade, I had trouble reading the blackboard.
Oh, really?
So I kept coming up with I'm not understanding what the teacher is teaching, etc. You know what my mom said? You need glasses. So I went and got glasses. It corrected my vision. Suddenly, everything came into focus. When I went to the Minnesota State Fair as a little kid, one of the things I loved to do is go in the fun house. Why? Because it had all the funny mirrors in it. The problem is I look at the funny mirrors and I'm looking at myself going, okay, now I know I'm a little chunky, but I'm not that chunky. Or I definitely know my head's not that warped.
Yeah.
Or here's another thing. When I'm in my car, you remember when you had to like use the dial to dial in your radio station?
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, if you were not right on the mark, the message that was coming in or the music that was coming in was scratchy and you couldn't hear it. It was kind of inaudible. But once you tuned in, clear as a bell, you knew exactly what was being said or sung. So this is the point. We have a mindset in Western Christianity that is out of focus, blurry. It's warped like a funhouse mirror, and an untuned radio, because we're not looking at the scriptures from the culture and the mindset in which they were written.
Well, as a builder, I don't know if you're a builder or not, Truth Barista, but I'm an average builder. I've been, a weekend warrior building things for a long time. And I know one thing, if you don't have a good foundation in your starting of your building, everything else beyond that will be crooked. Well, I wonder if sometimes American Christianity doesn't have the foundation you're talking about. It's clearly Western thinking. It's changed the way we see Jesus, understand him, even read the scriptures. We read our culture into them, and it has nothing to do sometimes with what the Middle East context was and what Jesus was trying to get across.
Exactly.
We westernize it and we go, huh? Well, isn't that a crooked wall?
With exactly that kind of look on the face that you had, just the, huh? That was really funny. I had a different Bible study I wanted to look at today, but let me get back into my tablet here. I want to pull up a class that I had taught a couple of years ago that you'll find fascinating. It's called Get Your Head On Straight. And I've worked with you long enough that I know that you got to get your head on straight. Okay.
Wow.
So this is what I want us to do. We're going to go through and I'm going to compare, and we're just going to kind of freestyle our Bible study over the next couple of Fridays. Why not? Let's see how long this takes. But the difference between Western thinking and Middle Eastern thinking, or what we call Greek Roman thinking, because that was the cultures that were active along the Hebraic Jewish culture in the first century. And as the church became more Gentilized, it's the Greek Roman way of thinking that took control over the development of Jesus' congregation, which we now call the church. And here's a classic case. In the first century, a church in air quotes, was a synagogue, and the assembly of believers was not called the church. It was called the assembly, kehelat, or the testimony, the gathering of the believers rather than a church. So you can definitely tell there's a shift. I mean, there was no such thing as a church in the first century. There were no such thing. I mean, even Christians picked up their title much later when they started calling them at Antioch Christians, meaning little Jesus's, little Christ, little Messiahs. Because why? We followed the Messiah. Oh, they're just little guys. That kind of a thing. But there were changes. Why? Culture is active. Culture changes. But it doesn't always change for the better. So what we need to do is put on those glasses, get rid of the distorted mirrors, and tune in the scriptural radio, so to speak, or the mindset radio, so we can understand things better. That's the benefit. We know God better. We know Jesus better. We know the scriptures better. We know how to live better. Ta-da.
Well, I don't think could be a rabbit trail, Truth Barista. I don't want it to be, but so often, you get these doctors of divinity in the pulpits, and they go, and this word in the Greek is this. And I'm going, the word in the Greek is this. Okay, well, if we're thinking along Greek and Roman lines, why are we quoting Greek rather than the Hebrew or the Aramaic?
Well, that is important because the earliest manuscripts that we do have of the New Testament, of the apostolic scriptures, are written in Greek. However, we do have manuscripts that are reliable on Matthew that's written in Hebrew. When linguists look at the apostolic scriptures, the New Covenant scriptures, the New Testament, they see great Greek words, but they see lousy Greek syntax, which means the sentence isn't put together like normal Greek would. However, they find it has fantastic Hebrew syntax. So the indication they go is, aha, this must have been written in Hebrew, but then translated word for word into Greek. And therefore, it's kind of like, well, it's the difference between German and English. And I speak a little bit of German. So in English, you would definitely say the noun and then the verb and then this. Well, in German, oftentimes you have the noun, this, and then the verb at the end. Wir haben, we have etwas zu essen. We have something to eat. Now, that would be a matchup between English and German. But in German, oftentimes, the syntax is turned around relative to English. So this is the art form in interpreting scripture. So the idea is, and here's an interesting point, the Septuagint is a Greek version of the Hebrew Bible that was written before Jesus. And what they basically found out is these guys not only did a translation, but they put Greek words on top of Hebrew words. What's the value? Well, you can go back and say, they use this Greek word for this Hebrew word. You can take the Hebrew word now and move it into the New Testament, and suddenly you have a New Testament that looks, sounds, and interprets as Hebrew.
That is fantastic, because I know, as far as I'm concerned, I interpret things through my culture, through English. And if I were an interpreter, I would still be influenced by that. So am I really getting a really correct translation, or something a little bit off? I don't know.
Our perspective skews what we see in Scripture. That's why I have to be very aware. And this is a fancy theological term. We have to understand our presuppositions, the things we suppose when we go to Scripture, and the things that we assume. Getting back to your guy who knows the great Greek words. Yeah, great. You have a great Greek word. How is it used? What's the context? What's being said here? You need to take all of that into account. Now, sometimes you can go, this is a great Greek word. Another way of doing it is, this is a great Greek word, and this is how it was used in Hebrew. So that is how it influences the text. So I know it's all kind of technical stuff, but it's very important for learning the Bible.
It does, and it gives you the correct interpretation of what was being said by Jesus. I mean, look at all the texts, and you've been so good at this, Truth Barista, over the years. You've said like the eye. Remember the eye being...
If you have a good eye.
Good eye, right. It really has to do with being stingy, as you taught. But English, it just means, it has a different meaning altogether.
Yeah. If you have a bad eye, you're stingy. If you have a good eye, you're generous.
Right.
Because the good eye is always looking for somebody to help. The bad eye closes itself to the need. So right there, if you simply go by the words, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then from your Western thinking, now you have to put a meaning in there to make it make sense. And it doesn't necessarily mean what it originally meant. So I've got the teaching here, and we can launch into some of these ideas if you want.
Well, I do, but you know what we need to do? We need to interpret all of this by the culture of a good cup of coffee, which I know you don't have right now, and I don't either.
Hey, hit me up, bro.
This is the Truth Barista, perfecting the art of telling the truth. Thanks for joining us.
Tag, guten Abend, hi. This is Siegfried, and I know you're listening to the Truth Barista podcast. After you are done, I want you to check out the rest of the High Beam Ministry website, highbeamministry.com. Yeah, you will find all sorts of really cool stuff besides the podcast. Things like the Frothy Thoughts blog, cruising through the Bible reading plan with comments, a growing teaching page, and other resources to wet your spiritual whistle. Yeah, it's groovy. Go to highbeamministry.com. All one word, highbeamministry.com. And be sure to hit the subscribe button and enter your email so they can let you know every week when the new stuff is posted. Do it now. Do that and you will be a most excellent person. Danke.
Hey, how did you like that modern lingo there? You know, that bro speak.
Oh, that's so
hip and groovy, right?
so cultural.
Yeah, well, I can't use some of the words they use in the culture today because that's just over the top. Okay, let me throw some stuff out to you. Here's some differences between, as we would say, Greek and Roman thinking, which in terms, I'll just call Western thinking because most of our culture and mindset grew out of the Greek and Roman cultures versus Hebraic thinking of the Middle East. Okay? So I'm going to throw these out and you can react to these and let me know how you see them connect to the Bible or connect to Jesus.
Okay, sure.
And let's just do the topic, the theme of understanding or how the mind works. Okay? In Western thinking, they emphasize a concept, which are ideas, facts, theories. We just kind of mull these things in our heads, right? In Hebraic thinking, they focus on reality, pictures, stories, real rooted stuff, realistic things. So in other words, here's an example. If Jesus were teaching with Western thinking, he would have said something like, well, if you're a generous person, I have to do it in English.
I was going to say, there you go. You've got that British accent again. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, if you're a generous person, you're imitating God. Okay. There's the concept of generosity. But in the Hebraic thinking, he's saying, if your eye is good, your body will be full of light. I'm saying the exact same thing in two different mindsets. One is more rooted in concept and theory, ideas. So the other one is really vivid. It's talking about eyeballs. It's talking about light and goodness. See, as opposed to just the idea of generosity and the idea of imitating God. Oh, let me ask you. I have this bottle of water in front of me here, as you can see. I would like you to describe this bottle of water to me.
Well, it's plastic, and it's got a cap, and it's got H2O on the inside as the contents.
Okay. The label, describe this label that's on there.
Well, the label simply says pure water.
Okay.
And a name. I can't read the name.
That was very, very good Western thinking. In Western thinking, you think in terms of form. What does it look like? In Hebraic thinking, you look at function. How does it act? So in Western thinking, it's clear plastic. It has a white cap. It has a blue label. It has, water in it and blah, blah, blah. In Hebraic thinking, you're going, it's a container that functions to hold water. Therefore, this bottle is a water carrier. It is a vase. It is something when dried out, I can carry my sunflower seeds in when I'm out fishing. You see, difference between form and function.
Okay, I have a question because I have been going to my local church for a long time, and they accent on form. The function part is so minimized. We talk about evangelism, for example, a lot. Well, we got to evangelize our friends. Okay, that's the form. The function would be we do it. And the issue is we don't do it. So the function part is really missing.
Okay, so then you could say, describe a church body, a congregation. Somebody would say it's a group of people who sit in church and collect ideas.
Yes.
I don't want to be too blunt, but really that's the essence of most people's Christianity. We collect as a group, we collect ideas, and then we take those ideas and mold them over the rest of the week. In a more Hebraic mode, you would be attending as a group to encourage one another, to love on one another, to hear from the teacher, not what a passage means, but how to do a passage. And then you take that verse out into the world and you practice doing it, not just thinking about it, doing it, whether it's evangelism or helping somebody or being polite to somebody or not running them off the road when they're in the left lane going too slow. Okay, anyway, let's move on. But you get what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Okay, so here's some more ideas on here. In the Western thinking, the focus is on rational, intellectual thoughts to follow, but in Hebrew thinking, it's a revelation from God to obey. Okay. In Greek thinking, Western thinking, it's a passive thought. In Hebrew thinking, it's active experience. See the difference? And once again, the big difference between Western and Hebraic mindsets or thinking is passive versus active, concepts versus realities. The Western mindset, it's centered on the brain, centered thoughts, and it's kind of passionless when you think about it. I'm going to consider this scripture and see what it means to me. That type of thing. In Hebraic thinking, it's organ-centered and it's emotionally centered. When it says, I love you, one of the words means it's from my kidneys. I kid you not.
Kidneys?
It's the kidneys were the seat of the emotion.
Wow.
And it was fascinating. It's very emotional. This is why when you go through things like the Psalms are not concepts. They weren't presented as theological teachings in a classroom. The Psalms are emotional. My God, why have you abandoned me? My enemies are attacking me from all sides. My bones are put out of joint. My heart is melting like wax within me. That's Psalm 22. Otherwise, in Western thinking is, Lord, I'm really bummed out right now because my enemies are disputing me in a debate. Hebraic stuff is really powerful.
I'm glad you said that, Truth Barista, because, in my local church, we're kind of taught not to get emotional. Because emotionalism isn't spirituality. Emotionism is emotionalism. It's just human emotions out of control. And our leaders don't think that's a good idea.
Because you could get too carried away and override your rationality. And we can't have that because we are a rational people. But we do that at the expense of our emotions. In Hebraic thinking, emotions are recognized and valued. It's how you feel as well as what you think.
But, okay, I got to pause here for a moment because you know as well as I do, and we've talked about it, that so much of Christianity sometimes has become, this is what I feel. This is what I feel. And it doesn't really have the same flavor or context to something that's studied out, and this is what it really means. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. You need both. It's a connection between the academic and the active experience.
Okay.
It's the mind and emotions. Here's a classic case. In Western thinking, we compartmentalize people. We are body, soul, and spirit. And God can affect one, but not the others. Not in Hebraic thinking. In Hebraic thinking, you are a single unit. And when God affects you, it affects your mind, will, and emotions, your body, soul, and spirit. So what you're thinking, your body and your spirit are also experiencing. It's a whole concept thing. It's a holistic. That's what I'm looking for. It's a holistic thing in Hebraic thinking. It's compartmentalized and broken down. In Greek thinking, why does that matter? That's why people can call themselves Christians and go to church and then leave that compartment and go home and live like hell. Because we have compartmentalized our lives. For the Jewish mindset, the Hebraic mindset, All of life is worship. You simply attend worship with other people. You do worship outside of the synagogue.
I love that. Oh, is that good?
That's
so good.
The difference in thinking and perspective. Here's what a difference, and I'll kind of whip through some of these here dealing with the mind. On the Western side, it's what the mind speculates versus Hebraic, what the eye sees. One is eternal, one is external. In the Western side, we look at abstract immaterial concepts versus in the Hebraic side, concrete material things. On the Western side, it says ethereal ideas. On the Hebraic side, it's the rubber hits the road stuff. So for example, in Greek, you would say, I'm looking at something. Or I would just say, I look at something. On the Hebraic side, it's, I lift up my eyes. See? Same thing, different description, but one's more rooted in the earthy, concrete ideas or experience of earth. On the Western side, I'm angry. In the Hebrew side, it's burning in my nostrils. These are right out of scripture, dude.
Wow.
Okay, on the Western side, I have no compassion. In the Hebraic side, I'm hard-hearted. See? Much more descriptive. On the Western side, you are a stubborn person. On the Hebraic side, you're stiff-necked. And the final one, on the Western side, I am determined to go to this place. On the Hebraic side, it's, I'm setting my face toward Jerusalem.
Well, that makes sense because I've been reading Jeremiah, and in Jeremiah, he said, my people are stupid. I mean, that's about as poignant you can get, right? Yeah. I mean, God calling his people stupid. I mean, come on. God, you're nicer than that, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm blanking right now whether it's Jeremiah or Isaiah, but it's so descriptive. No, the donkey knows its master and the ox knows its manger, but my people don't know me.
Yeah, that's
basically saying my people are dumber than animals. But he's not saying my people are dumb. He's just describing it and letting you get the concept. Yeah, oxen and donkeys are pretty dumb.
Stupid. Yeah, Isaiah chapter 1. That's where that's from. In case the people next door want to find it in their Bibles.
Yeah, I can hear them riffling through their Bibles there. Okay, on the Western side, truth. Oh, and this is really going to stick out because I know you love culture, right?
Oh yeah.
On the Western side of thinking, truth is a matter of opinion. It's relative. It's what we think it is. Hebraically, truth is what God says it is, and it's objective. I don't care. In other words, I don't care what your opinion is. This is what God says. This is very applicable in some of the things in our culture. People say, well, there are over 175 different genders right now, and, I can describe it however I feel like it, and blah, blah, and it's really ethereal, and it's just flat out weird thinking. And it's very easy in Hebraic thinking. Hebraic thinking says, no, God says there's only two genders, and that's the way it is. In fact, I saw a great meme on Facebook the other day that says, if you think there are more than two genders, then try milking a bull and see where that gets you.
That's fabulous. That's Hebraic thinking right there.
Yeah, or if you think you can switch genders, that type of thing. And it's just like, yeah, that's very Hebraic thinking. It is concrete, and you will get your butt kicked by the bull.
Well, Truth Barista, there's much more that we're going to cover on this. Obviously, we can't do it all in one conversation, but we'll come back and have another conversation, hopefully next Friday. And I'd like to know, how did we get so far off base? I mean, why did we get into this? Did the culture, Western culture, affect Western theology? I mean, how did it get all messed up?
Do you want me to answer that now, or do you want to wait till next week?
Well, let's kind of wait till next week. That way, I'll be fresh, you'll be fresh, and I'll be able to remember it.
Okay, let's do that.
This is the Truth Barista, helping you think differently about your world. Thanks for joining us.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message. I love you.
This is Jay, your Truth Barista. Thanks for listening to the Truth Barista podcast. The best way to find out when a new podcast drops is through RSS feed. Go to our website, look for the RSS button, press it, and then enter your email. You'll be notified when a new podcast drops. Thanks for listening.